What's good? It's Woog. This fight is floating a bit under the radar, but if you're into all-out action, this might be the one for you. We have Luis Nery, 33 wins and 1 loss, taking on Azat Hovhannisyan, 21 wins and 3 losses. Luis Nery, he's actually a 2-time champion now, which is interesting. He was a highly touted prospect. He started having a lot of success. He was looking very dangerous. He was scoring most of his wins via knockout, just obliterating a lot of his opponents and featuring on a lot of prominent undercards. And so he started working up the ranks, kind of earning the lesser titles. And then he had a title opportunity against a divisional champion, a 118 bantamweight champion from Japan named Shinsuke Yamanaka. This is a guy who had like 12 title defenses. So he was a champion for a few years, and he was undefeated when he defended his belt against Luis Nery, who again was a young fighter from Tijuana, Mexico, who was on the come up. And Luis Nery knocked out Yamanaka in the 4th round. But then he tested positive for PED, so he had to relinquish that title immediately, still undefeated. He won another fight, then he had a rematch against Yamanaka, and then he missed weight, so it was only Yamanaka who could retain the title after that fight, and Luis Nery knocked Yamanaka out again, this time in the 2nd round. So he basically won the title twice, but at the same time didn't really win the title once. So he's been looking really good and very promising, but it just seems like he's been blowing some very key opportunities at the wrong time. So then he goes on to win his next few fights, mostly via knockout, and then he finally goes up a division. He goes up to 122. His first fight at 122 is for a vacant 122-pound title, the WBC belt, and he won it over Aaron Alameda. But his next fight was against Brandon Figueroa, and this was in that Carson, California venue. Brandon Figueroa hadn't yet fought Stephen Fulton. Brandon Figueroa, by the way, is about to fight Mark Magsayo up at 126. I can't wait to see how that one pans out. But in this Nery versus Figueroa fight, Nery had the reputation of being the elite fighter. Brandon Figueroa had the reputation of like, let's keep an eye on this kid because he's a little like his brother, Omar Figueroa. He's throwing just a ton of punches. He seems to overwhelm his opponents with activity. He's tall for the division. Keep in mind, these guys were at 122 and Brandon Figueroa is 5'8", skinny dude, and he just throws a whole bunch of punches from a lot of angles. And this Nery versus Figueroa fight was an absolute banger. Put it like this: Figueroa ended up knocking Nery out with a body shot in the 7th round. Nery was up on the unofficial scorecards in like the 6th round. I think that the unofficial score, I think it might have been Farhood since it was on Showtime. I think he had it like 4 rounds to 2 after 6 rounds in favor of Luis Nery. So Nery he's a power puncher. He's a southpaw. So in this Nery versus Hovhannisyan fight, we've got southpaw versus orthodox, but Nery likes to just kind of put his head down and just throw hard, 2 to 3 punches at a time. And he's pretty fast too. So he could give you a little bit of movement, but he really likes to just brawl because usually his artillery can smoke you out. He's just coming with way too much power and speed, and that has mostly gotten him by against all of the opponents that he had faced up until Brandon Figueroa, because Figueroa is one of these guys like a, let's see, Navarrete, like a Antonio Margarito back in the day, like David Benavidez to an extent. One of these guys who just puts you on what I like to call the treadmill from hell. It's like, yeah, you might win a round against me. You might win 2, 3, 4 rounds against me. But can you keep up on this treadmill from hell for the course of 12 rounds? 12 rounds is a lot of time to be throwing 80 to 100 punches per round, which is what we were getting in Nery versus Figueroa. These guys were going at it. This was an insane pace, and Nery again was landing a lot of the cleaner punches. There were a lot of misses. Figueroa in the first few rounds looks like he's a little clumsy, with his style of punching. He gets hit a lot. So he's coming forward trying to walk you into the ropes and then just work you over with a 2-fisted attack. And you could tell by the 5th round, Luis Nery was kind of starting to move in a way that he wasn't in the first 4. He looked like he was ready for war, and that's what he wanted in the first few rounds. When it became clear, hey, this guy just keeps on coming, you saw Nery start to circle the perimeter of the ring a lot more in the 5th round. And then in the 6th round, he started looking like he was making his last stand. Like, he was throwing his hardest shots to the body, because I think he figured as Figueroa was going to his body, like, hey, I better start to slow this guy down. Maybe if I start tagging him to the body a lot more, since the head doesn't seem to deter him, maybe if I work the body, he could stop coming after me as tenaciously as he's coming after me. Well, it wasn't enough. He did put up a valiant effort, but by the 6th round, you could tell that Nery was kind of weakening and he was kind of slowing down. His defense was getting even worse. He's not a great defensive fighter to begin with. Sometimes when he throws those punches, his hands are around waist level as he's throwing the hooks. And so it leaves him vulnerable to just get caught up top. So it looked like he got hurt towards the end of the 6th round. And then again, it looked like in the 7th round, the waters were just too deep, and you could tell he was trying to hold on to Brandon Figueroa. Figueroa was just letting him have it, and then tagged him to the body one time too many. Nery crumbled over. That was the end of the fight. So since that, Nery's had 2 more fights, both at 122, like the fight against Figueroa was, and I still have reservations on whether Nery is as dangerous at 122 as he was at 118. At 118, they were talking about down the line, maybe even having a Nery versus Naoya the Monster Inoue type of fight, which, you know, that would have been 2 of the best guys at that time at 118. But at 122, not sure if Nery's still elite. He just happened to be fortunate enough to be fighting for a vacant 122-pound title against Alameda in his Nery's 122 debut. I thought he got gifted that opportunity in a sense. So that's what made him a 2-division champion. But then he lost to Figueroa. He's won his next 2 fights. One of those was a split decision win over Carlos Castro. Castro got stopped by Brandon Figueroa in Figueroa's 126-pound debut. But now Luis Nery is about to fight Azat Hovhannisyan, who is kind of an underrated all-action fighter. I mean, the guy only has 3 losses. His last loss was in 2018 in a title challenge against then 122-pound champion Ray Vargas. Ray Vargas held the WBC belt at 122 for a long time. Hovhannisyan actually gave Ray Vargas one of his toughest fights, at that point at least. Like, I hadn't seen Ray Vargas hurt in the way that Hovhannisyan had him hurt a few times. You know how Ray Vargas comes in super tall at 122, but Hovhannisyan, he's a little Mean Machine Kavaliauskas-like, where maybe if you're a supreme boxer, you could handle him, but this guy's gonna come in guns blazing with both hands, and he throws so violently. Like, as good as his right hand is, his left hook might be just as dangerous, and he's a little bit unpredictable on when he throws too, because sometimes he kind of runs red lights, if you will, where most boxers would be more calculated and wouldn't throw at certain times, at certain moments. No, Hovhannisyan will let those bullets fly, and he does it quickly. He's got deceptive speed, and I think that a lot of his opponents are just overwhelmed by it. Like, if you look at his 21 wins, 17 have come via knockout. That is an extremely high knockout percentage. So he's the much more proven guy at 122 than Luis Nery is. Yes, Luis Nery is the guy who's got the elite reputation because of some of the higher profile fights that he's had, because he's been on some big undercards, even though Azat Hovhannisyan in one of his recent fights was on the Ryan Garcia versus Emmanuel Tego undercard. But yeah, Hovhannisyan, after that loss to Ray Vargas, which was a unanimous decision loss in a competitive fight where Hovhannisyan, again, I thought he won a few rounds and he hurt Vargas a couple of times. His only other 2 losses came in 2014. That's a long time ago. That was a 6-round majority decision loss. So another close fight. This is when he was fighting 6-rounders. And then in his first professional fight, lost a decision in a 4-rounder. So Azat Hovhannisyan, after he really got going, has really only lost to Ray Vargas. He's knocked out Ronnie Rios. Ronnie Rios is the guy we just saw lose to MJ Akhmadaliev. Ronnie Rios is a pretty good fighter, but Hovhannisyan took him out in the 6th round, and that was right before the title challenge against Ray Vargas. So after that, Hovhannisyan has won his last 7 fights. 6 out of those 7 wins have come via knockout. So yeah, Hovhannisyan is a handful. He just doesn't have a name that's resonating at this point with the boxing public. Because 122 pound as a division doesn't always have the most visibility. Yes, when Carl Frampton was there, Leo Santa Cruz was there, it got a little more visibility. Now that Stephen Fulton is there, and we saw that Naoya Inoue is now coming up to 122. Yes, there will be more eyes on the division, but yeah, Hovhannisyan has been floating under the radar. He's a knockout puncher. He's a very vicious and violent puncher. He's got a very good chin. He's tenacious. Yes, he is now like 34 years old, so he might be getting a bit longer in the tooth, where it's going to be interesting to see if he could continue to keep his foot on the gas through the middle and late rounds in some of these fights as he enters his mid 30s. But when I think of Luis Nery versus Azat Hovhannisyan, I'm thinking, don't let the names and the reputations of this one fool you, especially after I saw Luis Nery basically get drowned by Brandon Figueroa. Now, granted, Hovhannisyan doesn't have the same style as Figueroa. Yes, he is a harder puncher. Hovhannisyan's a harder puncher than Figueroa, but in terms of just the 80 to 100 punches per round style of fighting, like I swear, go rewatch Nery versus Figueroa. These guys seemed like they were punching. They were throwing punches from the opening bell to the finishing knockout punch to the body. Every round seemed like both guys were just throwing for the entire round. Like, it was pretty breathtaking, and the commentators were pretty blown away as well. I don't think that Hovhannisyan is going to put that type of a pace on Luis Nery, but he is going to be coming at him, and Luis Nery likes to oblige when the fighter comes at him. Hovhannisyan, by the way, is trained by Freddie Roach. Nery is being coached up to box a little bit more, but a lot of his fights hit a certain point where Luis Nery turns back into Luis Nery, and he's trying to blow you out with his speed and power. I think that he's going to try to oblige when Hovhannisyan's coming after him. I just wonder if once he feels Hovhannisyan's power, if he's gonna start to get a little bit more reluctant, and if he's gonna start thinking twice, and if he's gonna have like reservations about really mixing it up with this guy in the way that he usually does. Like, I think that maybe in the early rounds, maybe he could beat Hovhannisyan to the punch in some of these exchanges. He is a southpaw, and yes, he does switch stances, but I think he has faster hands than Hovhannisyan, but I can't even be so sure of that. One, because he's coming up from 118 to 122, and also because, I mean, Hovhannisyan has pretty fast hands, and they both put, combinations together, but the way that Hovhannisyan throws like these sweeping hooks, this is going to be like this could quickly turn into a phone booth style, both guys just exchanging hooks type of battle, and let's just see who can take the other guy out. Like, this might turn into one of those styles of fights. In fact, I don't really see how it could evolve into something other than that. Like, let me know if you see this fight playing out differently, but I think that this is going to be a firefight. And, I was going to go with Luis Nery, given the experience, but Hovhannisyan has never been stopped. Luis Nery has been stopped. Granted, that's his only career loss, but I just think that experience within a division kind of matters. And I mean, these guys are roughly the same height. Hovhannisyan's just like a shade taller. These guys have the same reach. I mean, maybe Hovhannisyan's age catches up to him, and Nery's able to stop him in the middle or late rounds. But boy, like, it's just tough to see Nery as much as he gets hit, because he wasn't getting hit as much when he was coming up the ranks, but when he started fighting better fighters who could box a bit better, you started seeing Nery get tagged more. And he's going to get tagged against Hovhannisyan, and usually guys who get hit frequently by Hovhannisyan, they wilt and they go, and Hovhannisyan goes to the body too. Both of these guys go to the body. In this fight, I'm actually going to take Hovhannisyan via stoppage. I think that this is going to turn into a battle of wills at a certain point, and both of these guys have very good punching power. I just think that perhaps at 122, Hovhannisyan's power is more concussive than Luis Nery. But man, this is going to be a fun fight while it lasts. And I think that it's probably going to go into the middle rounds. I'd be surprised if one of these guys blows the other guy out in the early rounds. By the way, go rewatch Hovhannisyan versus Frank Manzanilla. Manzanilla thought that he was going to be able to trade with Hovhannisyan because Manzanilla hits pretty damn hard himself and is used to taking fighters out. It didn't work against Hovhannisyan. Hovhannisyan blew this guy out and stopped him in the fourth round. So again, I think that Luis Nery is going to look pretty good early, like in the first 2 to 3 rounds. But I think that Hovhannisyan, and there's something to be said about Hovhannisyan getting another crack at a title, since this is a title eliminator where the winner is in line to fight for one of Stephen Fulton's belts. We'll see if they make that Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue fight, by the way. Boy, I hope they do. But this is a title eliminator, and Azat Hovhannisyan has been just fighting his butt off since that last loss to Ray Vargas. So he's just champing at the bit. He really wants this opportunity badly. I'm not saying that Luis Nery doesn't. I'm sure that, he feels like he's missed some opportunities, blowing weight, testing positive for PEDs. So I'm sure that this means a lot to him as well. I just think that when it comes down to who wants it more, I can see Hovhannisyan winning this one and being willing to suffer more than Luis Nery will be willing to suffer on that given night. So yeah, I'm gonna take Hovhannisyan via, we'll say like mid to late round stoppage. I'm talking maybe somewhere between rounds 8 and 10. But let me know your thoughts on Luis Nery and Azat Hovhannisyan. Again, Luis Nery has a reputation of being the more elite fighter, but I think that divisions matter. I think that the recent loss to Figueroa, not to say that once somebody breaks you, essentially breaks you in the ring, that you could get broken more easily second or third time around, but dropping to all fours is on the table, I believe, once you've experienced that. So we'll see how strong Luis Nery is psychologically and mentally as this fight against Hovhannisyan gets ugly and brutal. But I'm picking Hovhannisyan here via late-ish rounds 8 through 10 type of stoppage. But please let me know your thoughts in the comments. This one, again, it's under the radar. It's taking place in Pomona, California, and it's taking place on the same day as Lee Wood versus Mauricio Lara. They're both fights are on DAZN, different times in the day. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.